3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Nittany No Huddle Podcast.
All right, we are back with another episode. I actually nailed that one, so I'm feeling pretty good. All right, so this is just our week 4 recap. What a wild week of college football. It was awesome. I was up at the whiteout. Luckily, a bunch of people bought Elon Musk's Starlink, so we had phenomenal coverage of all the games, multiple TVs. Shout out to YouTube TV. They had
I shouted them out last week.
Yeah, they had the 4 screens up. I mean, one of those games was like rambling and something else, but hey, 3 out of 4 ain't bad. I think Meatloaf said that or something. But just a great week for college football. Obviously, we talked in depth, maybe not in depth, but we recapped, Penn State 31-0. Not much more we got to say about that. The other big game that night, Ohio State at Notre Dame. I know you got a lot to say, Devin, or maybe not, but you have something to say.
I don't have a ton to say. Notre Dame should have won that game, realistically. And I don't understand how the last 2 plays happened. 10 men on the field once, I think you could maybe make an argument like it's an oversight.
Or like we didn't want to rush them out there and take the penalty, even though it was on the 1 yard line. So you're losing half a yard.
Correct.
Who cares?
Agreed. But then you do it again
after the timeout.
After a timeout. And it's just like, what? That looks really bad on Marcus Freeman. That's the head coach, right? Freeman, I think is his last name. That looks really, really bad on him and his whole staff. And it's just, coaches get fired for a lot less nowadays as far as not performing. But for them to be in that atmosphere, that game, that environment, and to choke like that's rough.
They should have had an interception.
They had
two
that one was a dropped interception and one was a could have been interception.
Yeah, I think they pissed off the football gods.
Apparently.
They're like, you know what? No, I will say this: I'd rather have 10 Notre Dame defenders than 14 USC defenders, though.
Maybe that's probably pretty true. That's pretty true,
to be honest.
Yeah,
but what else you got on that?
The other thing that really stands out, Sam Hartman. I know I've been loving him for 2.5 years now, but like he played really, really solid. And I don't think he's going to get any love now unless they can run the table and get to the college football playoff. But a very effective 17 of 25 for 175 yards, didn't throw an interception. I think he's doing really good things. And if they can keep running the ball with any bit of success, I think Notre Dame is in the driver's seat to try to get some wins. You look at their schedule, they got at Duke, they host USC, which I think is huge that they host them. They got at Clemson, which, as bad as I believe Clemson is, that's still going to end up being probably a good win for them if they win it. And not to be overlooked, but they got at Louisville next week. So after playing at Duke this week, they're at Louisville the following week. That's a game where Louisville could very seriously be ranked in that game. I don't know who's Louisville got this week. NC State. That's right. That's one of our pick'ems. If Louisville wins that game, they're going to be ranked. So that's 3 straight games potentially for Notre Dame to play ranked teams, followed by USC. So 4 straight games where they're playing ranked opponents. On the Ohio State side, and then Zach, I'll let you say anything about this game. I know we wanted to keep it short and we got other games to talk about. I'm not sold at all on Kyle McCord. His last drive was gutsy as hell. It was impressive for one drive, but for what if football quarters 15 minutes?
Yeah,
for however long it is, I'm not doing the math in my head. He was just fine. He was fine, which a lot of times teams want that, but not at the Ohio State University or a Ohio State University as we call it around here. He was just fine, and usually Ohio State has these explosive, game-changing quarterbacks, and that's not Kyle McCord, I don't think. Maybe it could be in a year or two, but it's not right now. And that, to me, shows why Penn State will beat them ultimately. Now, obviously, Travion Henderson looked really phenomenal. I think he's one of the best, most underrated running backs, and I think Notre Dame's defense is really good. So for him to rush for 7.5 yards per carry, 100 yards, it's a big deal. And obviously, Marvin Harrison gets dinged up. He was not 100% ever in that game, I don't think. I don't know. I feel like Ohio State is going to look back and realize that this was one that they stole. They completely stole this one. And Notre Dame, on the flip side, could let this completely ruin their season, because they had that. They might have been a top 2 or 3 ranked team this week had they won that game.
Absolutely.
So Zach, I'll let you talk. I feel like I've beaten some dead horses over here, but it's Ohio State versus the world, and we're gonna try to defend the world, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think you covered a lot of good stuff there. I'll start where I guess you started with on the Notre Dame side, which is I think their schedule is plenty tough enough that if they go 11-1, they will be in the mix. The problem for them will be that on that last weekend of the season, there will be a bunch of 11-1 teams playing, or 12-0 and 11-1 teams playing in conference title games, and they'll be sitting at home. But I think I think that schedule that you laid out is enough that, frankly, if they go 11-1 with a win over USC, if we're talking about a Penn State 11-1 team, I'd take Notre Dame, because that Penn State team would have one. They'd have either an Ohio State or Michigan win, and then 10 other games that pretty much have nothing on it. There aren't even like Louisville's or Duke's in the Big Ten this year. There's, maybe Maryland, we'll see. Maryland's probably the only one that you could point to and say, if Maryland takes care of business in all of their non-Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State games, and they go 9-3, they're going to finish ranked. That's probably like the best bet for Penn State to, maybe Iowa figures it out and wins the West and they finish ranked, but Maryland's probably the only option. So in any event, all that to say, Notre Dame's not dead on the water, but man, if they had this one, to your point, if they had this feather in the cap, they'd be sitting in the driver's seat. Really, they'd probably be 3 or 2 in my ranking. But in any event, on the Ohio State side, I will say, I'll give you a not so fast, my friend, on Travion Henderson in the Ohio State run game. So he had 14 carries for 104 yards and a long of 61, which means the other 13 carries went for 43 yards. And as a team, Ohio State rushed. Well, but it's Ohio State. Like if you're telling me 3 point anything yards per carry, I will take that 7 days a week and twice on Sundays. And
first downs.
As a team, they rushed 27 times for 126 yards, and again with a long of 61. So from my perspective, they didn't run the ball well. And I think just from watching parts of the game that I watched, obviously with it being the same time as Penn State, Iowa, it kind of made it tough. But I agree with Lou Holtz. I thought Notre Dame was the more physical team. I thought Notre Dame ran the ball a little bit better than Ohio State did. I thought basically Notre Dame gave the blueprint to what you need to do if you're a Penn State, since we're a Penn State podcast. How do you beat Ohio State, right? You got to have somebody that can slow down Marvin Harrison. Now, he got dinged up, and maybe that was a large part of it. But for those at home that didn't watch the game, Notre Dame has a cornerback, Benjamin Morrison, who was really good and just locked down Harrison. On that last drive, Devin, you mentioned there being an interception that really was just a gifted interception that they dropped. Yeah. Then there was another one that perhaps the corner could have made a play on. I think that was Morrison, and that was a horrible throw by McCord. They were trying to throw it into the back corner of the end zone, and he basically threw it underthrew it right to the defender, and perhaps could have had a pick there. But so basically my takeaway is I don't think Ohio State's great running the ball against competent defenses. And if you have a corner that you can use to try to take out Harrison Jr. or at least limit him offensively, this is not a juggernaut. Now, the flip side is I think Ohio State is better defensively than they've been in the last couple of years. So that's sort of the give and take, that I don't think this is an Ohio State team that's just going to run away and hide on the scoreboard, but they are tougher and they are grittier than normal. I don't know if I would go so far as to say what Ryan Day said, but I think they are getting a little bit tougher, and they're more defense first than they have been in years past. That's my on the field analysis of this game. Now, the whole Ohio against the world stuff is just ridiculous, and I think I don't know if I'm interested to hear you guys' take. I don't know if this is Michigan has just gotten under his skin so much that this wasn't even about Notre Dame. This was about Michigan. And this was about just hearing all the criticism of the Michigan losses. And you're not tough, and Harbaugh's tougher, and their offensive line is tougher, and their defensive line is tougher, and their whole program is tougher. And or is this just Ryan Day? I think a lot of this was just him sending a message to his players, right? This wasn't about Ohio versus the world. This was about, like, guys, we just won a huge game. And what I've been preaching to you all along is just toughness, being gritty, execution, all of these principles that I've been ingraining. And this is the moment. This is this is the celebration of what happens when you listen to that message. I really feel like he was just sort of preaching to his team there, and maybe trying to score some points with the fan base with the stupid Ohio against the world thing. But like,
Yeah.
no one's against Ohio. Like, I think nobody thinks about Ohio. Ohio just is, right? Like, nobody cares about Ohio. Nobody thinks about Ohio. It's not. I don't think it's high on anybody's priority list. But I mean, I will say,
Great
if the
way to
argument
put it.
is,
It's not on high. It's not high on anyone's priority list. That's like
It's-
that
it's-
has to be a short from that clip.
if the whole argument is like, well, you're holding us to a different standard than everybody else. Okay, you're Ohio State. You have a different standard than everybody else. You've lost like 5 games in the last 10 years. Don't be the coach somewhere else if you're not comfortable with that. Like, you'd never hear Nick Saban say that, right? You'd never hear Kirby Smart say that. Lincoln Riley, like these other coaches at the preeminent programs, like the idea that, I think he said, what did he say? He was like, we've played one bad half in the last 2 games or something, or last 2 years.
Yeah.
Again, it just kind of tells me that like something's getting under his skin, that like the outside criticism is leaking through. And
I think too, it's part of the fan base. His own fan base is getting under his skin. Like, I forget who it was. I was watching YouTube today, and somebody was at the game, and the guy next to him was trying to start the Fire Ryan Day tweet on Twitter, and then he like pinned it to go back to it after Ohio State won, and he had deleted it, obviously. But like, I think that's part of it too. I think that was more like, it's almost like a political like rally. Like, I'm your guy. Like, we're tough. Like, they all said we couldn't do it. Just kind of like get the fan base back a little bit. But I mean, going after Luke Holtz, like, you want to prove you're tough? That's not the way to do it, man. Like, I would have just been like, oh yeah, that senile old guy said we were gonna lose. Oh, yeah, whatever. Like,
Or never even mention it.
yeah, like, you're Ohio State's head coach. You've lost what? Outside of Michigan and Georgia and Alabama, like, who have you lost?
and
to?
Lou Holtz,
You haven't.
Lou Holtz
Like,
wasn't like, he wasn't like, this team is soft and will forever be soft. He basically was saying, look at the games they've lost in the last couple of years. They got out muscled by Michigan twice. They got out muscled by Georgia. They got out muscled by Alabama 2 years ago. Like, he was just basically saying, in these elite primetime games against the other elite programs, they've had a deficiency in just in terms of toughness and defense. And like, I think he's accurate, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think he was saying
they've had-
going forward forever that you're going to be soft. I just think he was identifying the flaw that, frankly, if you ask most rational Ohio State fans, I guess if you can find one, they probably would have said, yeah, it's that, like, Lou Holtz is kind of right. Like, those are the games that we've lost. And the reason that we lost those games wasn't because of talent. It wasn't because our quarterback wasn't good enough. It wasn't because our wide receiver room wasn't good enough. It was because we weren't good enough at scrimmage, and we weren't good enough defensively. Like, there's no secret there.
But yeah, I think that's enough Ohio State talk.
Yeah.
Devin, what other games stuck out to you this weekend?
Well, I have one that I'm going to save for a minute, but I mean, obviously there was a lot of ranked versus ranked games this week, and there wasn't upsets. So that's kind of interesting to me, is that we feel like, at least I feel like this year is really open, that there's more parity. NIL has changed a lot of things. The transfer portal has changed a lot of things, but we're getting these ranked versus ranked teams, and the higher team wins. So for example, Oregon, we kind of mentioned this in our last podcast, Oregon boat races Colorado. I don't think anyone was necessarily surprised by that. I personally was surprised that Colorado only scored 6 points. That's what stood out to me, is that Oregon held them to 6 points.
And that was a late
Yeah,
score.
and I forget. I mean, I can pull it up right here. I don't remember exactly how many yards that Colorado had.
It was like 100 or something.
Yeah, Colorado had
It was a lot.
159 passing yards and 40 rushing yards. So that really stood out to me, is that Oregon just you want to talk about toughness.
Yeah.
They completely out-physicaled Colorado from start to finish. Obviously, I think Travis Hunter would make a difference in that game, but he's not making a 36-point difference. They're not winning that game just because Travis Hunter is injured. And then, Zach, you probably maybe want to talk. I don't know if you watched your Utah Utes. Yes, they are your Utah Utes. That they played UCLA 14-7. Yeah, that is true. But, I mean, that's a 14-7 game, and I feel like people are really, really coming down on UCLA for not winning that. I think we've said it all year, and Zach, you've said it, and I'll throw it over to you for maybe like 2 or 3 minutes. Utah's defense is really freaking good. The problem is they don't have any offense without Cam Rising. None. And they score 14 points. I'm gonna pull it up here. If you want, Zach, I can. In 4 wins, they have 24, 20, 31 over Weber State, the Fighting Damian Lillards.
Weber's not a state.
Yeah, and then 14 against UCLA. But they've only given up 11, 13, 7, 7. So their defense right now is playing elite level defense. They just can't score. So, Zach, I figured you'd probably want to talk about that. I have one other game that I'm going to talk about then that stood out to me because it's a sleeper pick. But if you want UCLA, Utah here for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, go for it.
Yeah. So I think with Utah, it's pretty simple. They're the 2-time defending Pac-12 champs, right? So put some respect on that name. If Cam Rising isn't healthy or they don't get him back, and they don't get Brant Kuthi back, their star tight end, who's also out with a torn ACL, then I don't think they have enough offense to win the Pac-12. I think they might be able to skate by some teams like they did with UCLA here. But if they do get those guys back and they are healthy, I think they're as likely to win the Pac-12 as anybody else in that conference. I think the defense that they're playing is just phenomenal. Frankly, the score was 14-7, but what people don't realize if they didn't watch the game, one of the touchdowns for Utah was actually a pick six. So the defense not only did its job and just shutting UCLA down, it actually provided the winning margin. So they're an interesting one to watch.
What is this, mid-2000s Penn State? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think if things break right, they can win the Pac-12. I also think the Pac-12 is so deep that they are skating by, and that's not going to last forever. And the backup quarterbacks have been okay, but they're not going to be good enough to beat USC and Oregon and Washington, even Oregon State this week. And so I think the fact that Rising's been practicing, but hasn't been back yet, kind of concerns me a little bit. On one hand, it's nice that he's practicing, but on the other hand, it's kind of like, well, what's going on? What's wrong? Something's not right, obviously. Or like I kind of thought maybe they just wanted to milk him through or get him, just kind of hold on to him through the non-con and get him back for that UCLA game. And then the fact that he wasn't back for that is interesting. And then the Oregon State game this week is a Friday night, so it's a short week. So I don't know. It's concerning. It's definitely concerning, but I think they're the 2-time defending Pac-12 champions for a reason. Real quick before I kick it back to Devin, the other game that I just wanted to mention, and we talked about this a little bit with our top 25s, but that Florida State win over Clemson, again, I'm higher on Clemson than I think you guys are. I think that's a really good road win in a venue that they have not won in a while. And I think more importantly, that win pretty much solidified that other than Georgia, Florida State probably has the most easy path to locking themselves into a playoff spot. They already beat LSU. They already beat Clemson. They have a couple other, Miami's going to be an interesting game. I'm not sure if they get North Carolina and Duke, but they still have some games that they got to play through, but they have their biggest challenges behind them, and they pretty much just need to take care of business, and they are looking at a guaranteed playoff spot.
Yeah. What, you want to cover your game now?
Yeah, I didn't know if you had anything you were going to say about it.
Yeah.
So the other game, and unless Zach, you have something specific, I've been talking about them now for a couple weeks. I'm telling everybody, Nittany No Huddle Nation, keep an eye out on this Wyoming Cowboy football team. This weekend they played Appalachian State, one of the best mid-major teams over the last several years. They've done a lot of really good things. App State's up 19-7 in the fourth quarter. I forget exactly, 19-7 right in the fourth quarter. And Wyoming fights back to win it 22-19 on a blocked field goal return for a touchdown with 1.5 minutes to go in the game. Here's why I think you should be on the lookout for Wyoming as potentially the Group of Five New Year's Six participant. And here's
spoiler.
The spoiler of that. Here's why. I see 2 games on their schedule left that are challenging for them. Fresno State, who obviously I know Zach is high on and Jordan has pretty high in his rankings right now. That's going to be a heck of a game on October 7th. And the following week, if they survive that, they've got to travel to Air Force, which is going to be a tough. Air Force is currently undefeated. It's definitely going to be a really tough game. But what stands out to me about this Wyoming team is that I think they can do it at multiple levels. At quarterback, you've got Andrew Peasley. Andrew Peasley. is their starting quarterback. He has played really well in his time. Against App State, he threw it 15 times. That's it. And he had 31 yards. They did not deserve to beat Appalachian State, and they found a way. And that stands out to me. He threw for 200 yards against Portland State and 150 yards against Texas Tech. What you didn't hear in there was against Texas. Wyoming played at Texas a few weeks ago in a game that was tied, I believe. Let me double check here that I don't say the wrong thing and get roasted here. That game was 10-10 at the end of the third quarter. And Wyoming was playing their backup quarterback. Andrew Peasley did not play in that game. Was held out a shoulder injury, but more, I believe that they did not really think that that was a game that they were going to win, and they held him out for precautionary reasons. So Wyoming travels to Texas the week after beating Alabama and is tied 10-10 after 3 quarters, and a 44-yard pass play on the second play of the fourth quarter really kind of blew it open. And in that game, our Heisman contender, Quinn Ewers, was outplayed by Wyoming's backup quarterback. That stands out to me. The other thing that really gets me and what makes me excited is that now they have their starting running back back, Harrison Wheatley. This kid missed the first 2 games, so including their overtime win over Texas Tech, didn't play in that game, and has bounced back in their last 2 games with 266 rushing yards on 35 carries in 2 games. He is a big play guy. He has a 75-yard touchdown run and a 62-yard touchdown run. I think that Wyoming runs the rest of the table. They finished the year 11-1 with a loss at Texas, who could potentially be the best team in college football, potentially. And the only reason potentially they lost that game because their starting quarterback didn't play. That's a team to keep an eye on. Will Wyoming probably go out and lose 2 of their next 3 games? Yeah, probably, because I'm really good at picking teams that should be good and aren't. But I'm telling you, something is brewing there, and I think you should keep an eye on them.
All right, we're a Wyoming podcast now.
Hey, this is a week 4 recap. We're not talking about Penn State.
Yeah.
Wyoming it is.
The only other game I would want to talk about is, we hit it a little bit, Rutgers, Michigan. Michigan, played a complete game. Yeah, the score was pretty high, but Rutgers, they hung around, and that was a close game at halftime. It was 14-7 at halftime. Rutgers took the lead early. It was a close game, so I don't know.
Yeah, Rutgers was marching. I think it was like middle of the third quarter. They were down 17-7, and they had a 4th and 2, and could have kicked a field goal at that point. I think it would have been like a 30-yarder or something. They would have been down 17-10, but they elected to go for it and threw a pick 6, and that was just a backbreaker. So I don't necessarily think that they were going to come all the way back and win that, but at 17-7 in the third quarter, and they were driving deep in Michigan territory, it was still kind of a game, and I think that pick 6 obviously sealed it, but it wasn't one of those games that, like, for the people that didn't watch it or see any of the highlights, they'll just look at it and say, Michigan just kind of squeezed the life out of them. Probably never was in doubt. Probably never was close, and that really wasn't the case with that game.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other games you wanted to highlight from last week?
I don't think so.
Yeah, we kind of hit everything else in our other podcasts, so I think we're gonna keep doing these recaps just because we don't have enough time to talk all of Penn State and then all of the rest of NCAA.
Especially now that it's getting into there's a lot of really good games going on right now. College football is, in my opinion, the second best sport in America. So behind college basketball. But there's a lot of good games, so I like it.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments how you feel about this, since we're trying to break it up and just cover more stuff.
Give you more content.
Yeah.
So you don't have to watch it all at once. But yeah, I think every week, even 2 weeks ago when it was supposed to be the worst slate of games, like it was just nonstop action everywhere. And that's what I love about college football. And you really never know. There's always so many games going on, and there's only so many channels to watch them on.
Unless you have YouTube multi-viewer.
Yeah. But you need like 3 screens to get all of them up. Yeah, it's a whole thing. But it is a lot of fun. So I think that's gonna wrap up. You guys have any final thoughts?
I don't think so.
All good. I am going to throw this up one more time. I didn't do it on our last video, but we are giving away 2 tickets and a parking pass to Rutgers at Penn State. If you know any Penn State fans or you are a Penn State fan watching this, all you got to do is subscribe to us on YouTube and send us a DM either on Facebook. You can even comment on YouTube that you subscribed, and you can do Instagram as well.
Yep.
And we'll enter you in. 2 weeks from now, we're going to do a drawing midweek. We'll do it live. Have all the names up there, do a random wheel, and we'll see who's going to get those tickets. So I think that about covers it. All right. Nittany No Huddle Nation out.
Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast. Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Podcasts are posted weekly on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our new shows.